now, America, with Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. And now, Archbishop Sheen.
Fellow Americans, America has many faces, and each week we discuss one of them. I'm free to choose any aspect of America that I please. And choosing reminds me of not very long ago I went into the Grand Central Station in New York for breakfast, and I said to the waitress, "Would you kindly give me a cup of coffee, toast and a boiled egg, and a few kind words?" She brought me the coffee and the toast, and I said, "Don't you have a few kind words?" And she said, "Don't eat the egg." So the only condition I have is just a few kind words. That's all. And this face that we are discussing is the face of freedom. What does it mean to be free? I saw a cartoon not very long ago of a wife visiting her husband in prison. He was behind the bars. And she said to him, "I've decided to give you freedom. I'm going to get a divorce." We have some in America who believe there's no such thing as freedom. As a matter of fact, there's a professor at Harvard. I will not mention his name, but he holds that we are determined. There's no such thing as freedom. We are determined by our environment, the way we live and the decisions that we have made and so forth. But I noticed this same professor on television one night, and someone criticized his book. And he got very angry. Why should he get angry? He was determined to be that way. And when someone praised him, he was delighted. Now, we are determined to some extent. For example, we cannot make money out of bacon. But we live in a conditional universe, not a determined one. G.K. Chesterton, the famous English essayist, was discussing, or rather debating, with a determinist one day, and he said, "I always feel sorry for Mr. McCabe, the determinist. He never can say thank you for the mustard." Think that over a minute, and it'll come to you. And there was one other story, about determinism. In the early colonial days, a farmer went to the village, and his wife, who was a determinist, said to him, "Why do you want your gun? You're either predetermined to be shot or you're not predetermined to be shot. If you're predetermined to be shot, the gun won't do you any good. If you're not predetermined to be shot, you won't need the gun." He said, "Well, suppose I'm predetermined to be shot on condition I don't have my gun." So we live in a moral universe. It is conditional. The reason we're good is because we could be bad. A man can be a patriot only in a country in which it is possible to be a traitor. One can be a saint only in a world in which it is possible to be a devil. No crowns of merit rest suspended over those who do not fight. We might all go out to battle and enterprise alone and unheeded, were there not some great issue at stake. And the decisions that we make freely help determine our character, very much like an icicle. Have you noticed an icicle on a roof? It The roof was dirty. The little drops of water that poured into the icicle made a dirty icicle. If the water was clear, it was a crystal icicle. And so our free choices determine the kind of character we will be. Now I'm going to tell you first of all how we lose our freedom. By two false definitions of freedom. The first false definition of freedom is freedom means the right to do whatever you please. The second false definition of freedom is it is the right to do whatever you must. As a matter of fact, two great books have been written about this subject. One was Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, written in 1932. And the other, George Orwell's 1984, published in 1949. Now, these are two false definitions of freedom. First, freedom is the right to do whatever you please. That makes freedom a physical power. Certainly one can do whatever he pleases. He can stuff Aunt Lizzie's mattress with old razor blades. He can turn a machine gun on his neighbor's chickens. Is that what freedom means? No limits? No boundaries? Those who accept this definition say, well, who's going to stop me? I can do whatever I please. Suppose parents put that into practice with their children and gave them no pot training. Suppose you let every child grow up doing what he pleased. When they grew up, they would hate themselves. And they would hate you for not training them. So this definition of freedom has been called that which makes the Raskolnikov man. Raskolnikov was a character in Russian literature, and he killed an old woman. He took no money. He said, I just did it because it pleased me and because I didn't want anybody to tell me that I couldn't kill. That's the Raskolnikov mentality. So this kind of freedom means that freedom is nothing but options. We go through life, well, with a great variety of choices. As a matter of fact, do you know that we have put up a building in this generation? Now, I'm not speaking of politics here. I'm speaking of a building. And the building, curiously, is Watergate. Do you know that there are 240 different apartments in Watergate and 167 different floor plans? World of unlimited options. What does this kind of freedom amount to in the end? Well, it means that it's very much like being put in a supermarket. You can choose anything, but what's the purpose of the choosing? That is never answered. Or like being put into a castle with 1,000 rooms. And in each castle you have great pleasures and some happiness. And when you get tired in one castle, you move to another. And that room will give you pleasure too for a time. But those who go through those rooms never notice that there are no windows in the castle and there are no doors. They're just living in a closed world of choices. But there's no goal or purpose or destiny in life. This is the first false definition of freedom. Do whatever you please. Now this creates a chaos, because when everybody does his own will, what do you get? You get a crisscross of individual egotisms. Well, that produces confusion. Suppose sheep in a pasture are running in different directions. What does the shepherd do? The shepherd sends a dog after them. And when we produce a culture and a civilization in which everyone does what he pleases, there comes a reaction in which some dictator arises and says, now you will not do whatever you please. Now you will do whatever you must. So that a totalitarian system is the forcible organization of a chaos that was produced by everybody doing his own thing without any concern for a neighbor. This kind of freedom is the communist freedom, well described by Frederick Engels, who cooperated with Karl Marx in the development of communism. Engels said, if I drop a stone from my hand, that stone is free to fall because it obeys the law of gravitation. And so long as I obey the will of the dictator, I am free. The moment I disobey the dictator, I am no longer free. So freedom becomes a must. I worry sometimes about how much the young people are under a must. The must of their own establishment. And so, well, everybody's taking dope. Why shouldn't I? I can't be different. Or none of the other girls are virgins. Why should I be one? The terrible must of an establishment. We fail to realize that 1/3 of the people of the world are under this false definition of freedom. Let me read to you something of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor, you remember, I'm looking at my little clock here to see how much time I have. The Grand Inquisitor appears in Brothers Karamazov of Dostoevsky. A very evil character. And he should not have been. He actually was. And the Grand Inquisitor is talking to Christ. And he says, you wanted to give men freedom? Listen, people don't want freedom. How true that is. They don't want responsibility. And this is what the Grand Inquisitor says. And we shall persuade them to renounce their freedom and give it over to us. In their leisure hours, we shall make their life almost like that of a child. We'll give them children's games, innocent dances, and they will love us like children because we allow them to sin. We shall allow them to have mistresses and wives or not to have them. And they will come to us cheerfully. A day is coming when men will say there is no freedom, there's only hunger. And they will come crying and fawning to our feet saying, give us bread. That's the way freedom is defined in the totalitarian states. And the first way is the way we define it in our in our Western world. Now, it need not be this way. As a matter of fact, this Raskolnikov that I mentioned, this famous character who just wanted to do what he pleased, this Raskolnikov was talking to his mistress Sonia, for whom he had no respect whatever. He said, "Do you know what's going to happen to you? You are either going to jump off a bridge, or you're going to go mad, or you're going to cut your throat." And Sonia began reading the 11th chapter of John, the story of the resurrection of Lazarus, and she said, "No, I don't need to be any of these things." She sought a different kind of freedom. It is the true freedom. And that these are the way freedom is lost. Not please, not must, but freedom is the power to do whatever we ought. That is freedom. Now I'll allow my little angel to erase my blackboard. Do you know what kind of shampoo my angel uses? Halo. The freedom to do whatever we ought. Now that implies something else. Freedom to do whatever we ought implies a goal, a purpose, a plan, a meaning in life. That's the meaning of ought. For example, here's our goal or purpose or plan. A man wants to be a doctor of medicine. He ought to study. He ought to practice. A man wishes to be an athlete. He ought to exercise. Not he must. He ought to. Suppose my goal in teaching geometry, say, is to draw a triangle. Well, I ought to give it 3 sides. And not in a stroke of broad-mindedness, giving it 4. If I want to draw a giraffe, I ought to give it a long neck, not a short one. If I have a razor, I ought to use it to shave and not to sharpen pencils. You see, everything has a goal or a purpose, and as long as we are working toward that goal, we are free. For example, you're free to drive an automobile, but you ought to obey the traffic laws. Sure, you can do whatever you please. Then you'll be subject to a must if you do that. So there's always, therefore, an ought. How much time do I have? Oh, yes. Is that 7 minutes? How many minutes is that? 5? 7. Now, how many goals do we have and purposes? Well, we have 2 kinds of goals. We have the approximate goal. For example, a girl wants to become a teacher. Or a man wants to marry, raise a family. These are approximate goals. Someone else wants to make money. But then after all of these proximate goals, then there comes another goal. Beyond that, for example, make money. What then? Well, to buy things. What then? After you bought things. What then? So there has to come, ultimately, some supreme ought, or goal, or purpose. And what is this thing that we want? And as long as we're working toward it, we're free. What is it that makes us free? Well, what are the things that we really want, deep down? Suppose we could take out our heart and put it in our hand as a kind of crucible. to distill out of it its inmost yearnings and aspirations, what would we find them to be? What would you want first of all? Life. That's what you want. Not life for 5 more minutes, but a life without decay, a lasting life. And suppose you continued analyzing this heart of yours, what would be the second thing that you would want? Your ultimate goal, truth. You want to know. That's why we hate to have secrets kept from us. Men just as well as women. And this knowledge that we seek is not just geography or mathematics or literature, but all knowledge. What is the third thing we want? Love. And a love without satiety. A love without hate. That is our ultimate. Well, do we find them here? We certainly do not find them here in all their perfection. For example, I do not find life here in its fullness, because each tick of the clock brings us closer to the grave. We do not find truth here in its fullness either, because the more we study, the less we know. I wish I knew now 1/10,000,000th as much as I thought I knew the night I was graduated from high school. That was the last time I was smart. Now I'm not young enough to know anything, everything. And thirdly, we want love. The reason I'm confused about the time is because the lights are very strong and I can't see the clock very well. But I have to stop at a certain time. I cannot be like the professor of Scripture who was talking on 12 minor prophets, and he used an hour and 45 minutes for 3 of them. And he saw the audience was getting a bit tired, and he felt that he should introduce the next one with some degree of histrionics. And he said, and now, where shall I place Habakkuk? Someone got up in the back of the hall and said, you can take my seat. Well, if you're following me, we have certain goals. We want life, we want truth, and we want love, but we do not find them here in their fullness and perfection. Not truth, I was saying, and not love either, because a day comes when the last cake is crumbled at life's great feast, and the last embrace is passed from friend to friend. And there's nothing perfect that ends. So, are we to be disappointed, wanting this life and wanting this truth and wanting this love? Shouldn't there be some goal to satisfy us? It's very much like looking for the source of light on this stage. You do not find the light under the carpet. Their light is mingled with shadow. Not under the floor, their light is mingled with darkness. If I am to find the source of light that is in this theater, I must go out to something that's pure light. And if I am to find the source of the life and the truth and the love that I have in part, I must go out to a life that has no admixture of death, to a truth that has no admixture of error, and to a love that has no admixture of hate. And that is perfect life and perfect truth and perfect love. That's what I'm looking for. As the poet Cale Young Rice put it, if I can remember it, there is a quest that calls me, and nights when I am alone. The need to ride where the ways divide the known from the unknown. I mount what thought is near me, and soon I reach the place, that tenuous rim where the scene grows dim and the sightless hides its face. I've ridden the wind, I've ridden the seas, I've ridden the moon and stars. I've set my feet in the stirrup seat of a comet coursing Mars. And lo, everywhere through earth and air my thoughts speed lightning shod, till they come to a place where checking pace they cry, beyond lies God. That is the ought. And the more I live out my purpose of seeking life and truth and love, the more free I am. We have to understand that there is a difference between a freedom from and a freedom for something. Sure, we want to be free, for example, from being in chains. Why? What for? Well, in order that we might be men and women. That's why we do it. There's no purpose, actually, in having a freedom from something unless we have a freedom for something. A rich man went up to a taxi driver and he said, "Are you free?" Taxi driver said, "Yes, I'm free." The rich man left shouting, "Hurrah for freedom!" Well, crazy. If he was free, he had to be free for something. So we have to be free from restraint for a purpose or goal. And that implies, indeed, some limitations. There was an island in the center of the sea. How does one draw an island? Well, that's an island, huh? These are waters, this is the sea. I tell you everything I draw. Those are waters, and this is an island. Now you have the picture. An island in the sea. Inside of that island, children lived, and they played, and they danced. And one day, some men came in a rowboat to the island. They climbed over the walls of that island, and they said to the children, "Who put up those walls? They're restraining your freedom. Break them down." So the children tore down the walls. Now, if you go back, you will find all the children huddled together in the center of the island, afraid to sing, afraid to dance, afraid of falling into the sea. Thank you. Bye, and God love you.